The story of Moses. Moses was born in a time when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. The Pharaoh, fearing the growing number of Israelites, ordered that every newborn Hebrew boy be thrown into the river. But Moses' mother, desperate to save her child, placed him in a basket and set it adrift on the Nile. The basket was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who took him in and raised him as her own, naming him Moses, which means drawn out of the water. As Moses grew up, he became aware of his Hebrew heritage. One day, while watching the Israelites work as slaves, he saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew man. In a fit of anger, Moses killed the Egyptian and fled to the desert to escape Pharaoh's wrath. He found refuge in the land of Midian, where he married and started a family. Years passed, and one day, while tending to his father-in-law's sheep, Moses saw a strange sight, a bush that was on fire but not burning up. Curious, he approached the bush, and from it, God spoke to him. "Moses, Moses," he called, "I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. Go and set them free." Moses was hesitant. "Who am I to confront Pharaoh?" he asked. But God reassured him, "I will be with you. You will lead my people out of Egypt." Moses still doubted, asking, "What if they don't believe me?" God gave him signs, first turning his staff into a serpent, then making his hand leprous and healing it. God told Moses to use these signs as proof of his power. Moses was still unsure and asked God, "I am not a good speaker. How will I convince Pharaoh?" God, in his patience, told Moses that he would give him the words to say. He even sent Moses' brother Aaron to help him. Moses returned to Egypt and, with Aaron by his side, went to Pharaoh, demanding, "Let my people go so they may worship their God." But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he refused. This led to a series of plagues sent by God, turning the Nile into blood, sending frogs, locusts, and hail, and even causing darkness to cover Egypt. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained stubborn. Finally, after the 10th and most terrible plague, the death of the firstborn of Egypt, Pharaoh relented. He told Moses and the Israelites to leave. Moses led the people out of Egypt, and they began their journey toward the Promised Land. As they reached the Red Sea, they were trapped by Pharaoh's army. The Israelites cried out in fear, but God told Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea. When Moses did, the waters parted, and the Israelites crossed safely on dry land. When Pharaoh's army tried to follow, the waters returned, drowning them. In the desert, the Israelites faced many challenges: hunger, thirst, and doubt. But Moses trusted in God, who provided food from heaven, called manna, and water from a rock. He led them to Mount Sinai, where God gave him the 10 Commandments. These laws would guide the Israelites' lives. Despite the miracles, the Israelites often grumbled and turned away from God. They built a golden calf to worship, angering Moses. He destroyed the idol and pleaded with God for forgiveness on behalf of the people. Moses continued to lead the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years, teaching them to trust in God. But when they reached the Promised Land, Moses was not allowed to enter it. God showed him the land from a distance, and Moses died there, at the age of 120. Moses' legacy lived on, as the great leader who led the Israelites out of slavery, received the law, and trusted in God through all challenges. His story remains a powerful testament to faith, obedience, and God's deliverance. This story of Moses highlights his courage and obedience to God's calling, even in the face of fear and doubt. It also showcases God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises to his people.